Hello and welcome to another edition of MMA Crypt's Fighting Talk. I would like to welcome back for today's show our Scottish companion, Mr. Greg Marshall, and joining us for his fourth straight appearance on MMA Crypt's Fighting Talk is Mr. Brian Hunt. Okay, the topics will be What the Fuck Matt Riddle, GSP and Aliens, and finally Rick Story wants Woodley. Alright guys, let's take it to round one, and What the Fuck Matt Riddle? It was released earlier this week that Matt Riddle was released from his Bellator contract. Can I get your thoughts on this, please, guys? Let's go with you first, Greg.
For me, I'm not really too bothered. He doesn't take MMA seriously as a fighter. For me, doesn't seem to care about it. And if he's going to pull out the fights because he can't do some simple paperwork, then bye.
Brian, what do you think?
Well, I think if fighting was smoking dope, he'd be a world champion. So I think that's more important to him than fighting. He's not a professional. I don't think he's wants to be a professional, and sadly, I think he's too strung up on getting high versus fighting, and that's unfortunate. He can't set something aside for a few weeks to really focus on it, and maybe it's something else. I mean, maybe he has other issues, and the getting high was covering that, and maybe he's not smoking anything, and those other issues are coming up. Don't know. Don't really care. It's Bellator's problem kind of at this point in time, and they did the right thing. Sign him, give him a chance. Screws up, get the hell rid of him.
Well, obviously he pulled out the first fight for Bellator with a cracked rib. Does anybody know the reason why he had to pull out of Bellator 109, which led to his Bellator release? Do you know, Greg?
Yeah, well, I read that it's to do with he didn't get a license to fight because he failed to hand in his medical paperwork, which suggests to me that he had a weed problem again.
Interesting. Did you hear that same story, Brian?
I've actually heard nothing. I'm purely speculation on my part. I got nothing.
Well, as far as I go, I think this sort of black marks Riddle's name. I don't see many companies dealing with Riddle in the future unless he comes out and gives some sort of statement. Do you guys think he will? Go with you first, Greg.
He can give a statement if he wants. I don't really care. Like I said already.
Do you think he should give a statement?
If he feels he needs to, but I don't really see why he needs to make a statement. It's pretty clear to everybody that he doesn't really care about how he goes about fighting as long as he can do what he wants to do with his weed. And I think whatever he says, nobody's going to believe what he says if it's a genuine thing or not.
Brian, do you think he should come out and make a statement?
If he wants to continue fighting, he needs to try to get something backing his PR aspect of this so he has a chance. No, what he needs to do is send an apology to the guy he was fighting, maybe to Bellator, not asking to get back in, but just a sincere apology. If it's not sincere, if he doesn't give a shit, then no, absolutely. We don't need to see another fake apology of not being sorry for the actions, being sorry I got caught for my actions. That's what most apologies are, is some PR written thing of, well, I'm not sorry for anal raping a kid. I'm sorry for getting caught for anal raping a kid. And that's what it's going to come down to on this thing. He's not sorry for his actions. So, no, it'd be a fake apology.
Okay, guys, moving on to round two. And an interesting topic. Joe Rogan came out and called for GSP to retire in the days after UFC 167. He claimed GSP had serious memory loss at UFC 167. Also mentioned that GSP was on his podcast show. GSP was talking about being abducted by aliens and missing time when he appeared on his podcast show. Basically, he would be driving his car, then all of a sudden he would be home. Now, this sort of flew under my radar. I only just heard about all this. Have you only just heard about this too, Brian? And what's your take on it also?
It's news to me. I don't listen to Rogan's podcast very often, or broadcast, or whatever it is that he does. Who knows? I mean, he's a fighter. He makes a living getting punched in the head. If he's going to have some memory lapses, it shouldn't be too much of a shock. You see in the NFL all these guys having issues after the game's done. So, should he retire? That's up to him. I don't think anybody should push anybody to retire. It's if he knows he's not losing fights, he's still winning fights despite how we might score him. He's still competitive. So it's if he wants to do it, do it. He doesn't have to do it. So if he has the desire, it's completely on him.
Diego Sanchez was scared of aliens too. No GSP. You don't think it's Greg Jackson, you know? Maybe he's a secret alien. You know, there seems to be a lot of nipple twisting going on over there. You know, Sanchez was there at the time, then GSP goes over. Greg, have you heard this story before? And also, what's your take on it too?
Yeah, I hadn't heard anything about it. I generally don't listen to Rogan's podcast because it just goes on for too long. So it was all news to me. But again, there's maybe something in it that he's maybe taking punishment and it's causing him to lose his mind in that. But same with the retirement. Rogan calling for him to retire. It's not really Rogan's position to call for him to retire, in my opinion. It's up to GSP. If GSP feels he can fight, then he can fight. If he feels he wants to retire, then retire. It's entirely up to him.
Do you think it's time for GSP to retire?
No, he won his last fight. So no, why should he retire? Is he? No, absolutely not.
Greg, would you call for GSP to retire?
I would say yes, but not because I don't think he won the fight or whatever. I think yes because there's been too much coming out of his camp for the last 9 months or so saying that he's going to retire. So something else is going on that he's obviously got the thought in his head. And if the thought's in his head, then maybe he should. But again, it's entirely up to him. If he wants to fight on, I'm happy to watch him fight still. He's earned the respect that he can make his own decision.
Well, we can only give our opinions. The decision is GSP's, of course. It seems Mr. White has got his own way, and GSP will not be taking that vacation from the sport. And there will be an announcement on GSP versus Johnny Hendricks rematch in the next couple of weeks. Are you guys excited to see this rematch? And how do you see it panning out? Start with you first, Brian.
I'm excited about the rematch. I think it's going to look a lot the same. It might be 2 rounds each going into the 5th, and I think Hendricks decides he wants to be champion this time and decides to show up for the 5th round and wins it. I think they both fought really good fights. The biggest difference is the champion answered the 5th round and the challenger did not. If the challenger did, he'd be the champion right now. So we all bitch about the first round scoring it, and it was a close round. The 5th round wasn't close. That was the most crucial round. That was the end of the fight. Going 2-2 either way, depending on how you scored it. So I think everybody's pretty clear who won the 5th, but Hendricks didn't answer it. I think this time he does and becomes the champ.
Greg, are you excited for this rematch, and how do you see it panning out also?
If I'm honest, I'm not 100% convinced it's going to happen. I still think there's going to be a few talks behind the scenes, and GSP is going to still be looking to take a long break. But I'm quite excited for it to happen if it does happen. And kind of similar to Brian, I can see it going along the same lines as the first fight. The only thing, instead of Brian saying that Hendricks should pour it on in the 5th, I think Hendricks might pour it on early and he might tire quicker. Because he's obviously given GSP a chance in this one to get through the 5th round. I think he might push it on in the first 3 rounds and maybe gas again like he's done in previous fights.
Do you feel it's Dana White trying to force the issue right now? You know, he's trying to push the topic of Hendricks, GSP 2, putting it out to the public so the public get on it and sort of back GSP into a corner right now?
I think probably, yeah. He knows GSP's his cash cow. He's the biggest draw in the company. And he obviously knows now that GSP's having thoughts of stepping away. So he's desperate to make this second fight. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe part of the agreement is that fight the next one and then leave.
Okay, moving on to our third and final round of the show. Following his win at UFC 167 against Brian Ebersol, Rick Story has come out and laid down a challenge to Tyron Woodley. What's your thoughts about this fight, and do you think it'll actually materialise? Let's go with you first, Greg.
Possibly it could happen. Story's put himself back into the kind of top 15 range, but for me, I think Woodley deserves a fight further up the ladder. He's done more, and he deserves a possible fight with maybe Robbie Lawler next. But I think it probably will happen because I think Lawler will be kept for something bigger.
Woodley and Lawler are teammates at the minute. I had Jason I on Dr. MMA the other day. I was actually going to ask, but I didn't want to be too cheeky, if they've actually talked about fighting each other. Because obviously there's Thiago Alves, there's Jason I himself, there's Robbie Lawler, there's Tyron Woodley. You know, what's going to happen with these guys now? They're all winning. You know what I mean? So, Brian, do you think it materialised? And what do you think of the fight?
I like the fight. It's almost a battle of guys that are up and down, and they're both due to be down. So, in their next fight, I think they're both 2-2 out of the last 4 fights. So it's kind of a hard one to judge. Rick Story looked amazing. I mean, he didn't finish the guy, but I think that's more because Ebersol has a granite chin. But Story looked great. But if he comes towards Woodley with that same kind of, I'm just going to pile through you and knock the shit out of you, Woodley could send him sleeping too, because Woodley hits freaking hard. So I like the fight. It's not a bad fight. I'm kind of with Greg there. It's like, well, Woodley's a little bit above that. But then I go back 3 fights ago, he lost to Nate. And I go back, how the hell did he lose that fight? So he's not as high as he would look against Koscheck. And he's probably not as bad as he looked against Nate. And he's somewhere in the middle. So it's a good fight. I don't know who else they should fight. I don't think he's up. Lawler's kind of top 5 now after that win, in my opinion. So I don't think Woodley's there. But it's a slight step down against Story. But it's a good fight. I'd watch it.
Do you think Brian Ebersol let Rick Story off in that fight? You know, basically it was a poor performance. Or do you think that was just a really good performance by Rick Story and he never actually let Ebersol in the fight?
Ebersol is another up and down guy. I mean, he looked amazing in some fights. When he beat Lytle, that hurt so bad. But he looked amazing in that fight. I think if that Ebersol shows up, that showed up against Lytle, against Story, it's a good fight. I still think Story might have won, but it'd be at least a good fight. He did nothing in this fight. I don't know. Is he cut yet? I wouldn't be surprised if he's cut. That was just a really bad showing.
There's been no mention as of yet if Ebersol's been cut, and I think it would be a very competitive fight, to be honest. Rick has, he's had some big fights, but the thing is, I do feel this would be a step up for him in competition. Obviously, Tyrone's a wrestler. Rick Story's a wrestler, you know what I mean? I just think it's a bad matchup, and I think Woodley's boxing is better. Do you guys think this is a bad stylistic matchup as well? Obviously, like I mentioned, the boxing and the wrestling, they're Story's 2 main strengths, and they're also Woodley's main strengths, but I feel Woodley's better. So, do you guys feel this is a bad matchup for Rick Story, and Woodley is better in those areas? Let's start with you first, Greg.
Yeah, well, looking at the guys that have beaten Story lately, I think it is a bad style matchup for him. I'm maybe in the minority, but I don't particularly like Rick Story. I think he's overrated because he keeps beating low guys pretty well, and the higher rated guys seem to beat him quite easily. Other than Johnny Hendricks, strangely. But I see Woodley walking right through him, to be honest.
Brian, what do you think? Do you think it's a bad style matchup for Rick Story?
God, it depends what Woodley I look at. If it's the Nate Woodley, Rick Story has a good chance. If it's the last Woodley we saw, no, I'd have to agree. But Koscheck also caught Woodley, so Woodley is hittable, and Rick Story hits pretty hard. So I don't think he's going to walk through him. I could see him winning, but I do like the fight, and I wouldn't be 100% set on the outcome of the fight. It's just, but Woodley looked pretty damn good with knocking out Koscheck, but he did get hit. So I like the fight, and I think it's worthy fight. And
Brian, that was just you getting excited because Koscheck got knocked out. Everybody gets excited when Koscheck gets knocked out.
True story, very true story. But I always go back and say a fighter is never as good as their last win or as bad as their last loss. We as fans get super excited about, Robbie Lawler, he's next champion. Well, no. But was he as bad as he looked against Jake Shields? No, he was not that low either. So we always have to kind of just take a step back and give it a few months to really evaluate how good is Woodley, how good is Story. We'll see in a little bit and get that freshness out of our mind of just the pure rush of the adrenaline from the knockout. So I like the fight. I'd be happy to see it.
Okay, that's wrap for round 3, and sadly today's show. As always, keep supporting our shows, and every view and share is greatly appreciated. Be sure to stop by MMACrypt.com and follow us on Twitter at MMA Crypt. From the MMA Crypt team, thanks for watching.